Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Larry Bomback, who shares his skills journey from being a multi-instrument musician through a career in finance to where he's at today as a fractional CFO to both for-profit companies and nonprofit organizations. I hope you enjoy. Larry Bomback, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Looking forward to this.
I know music played a big part in your background and your upbringing. Was that something you were thinking about in high school? Did you know what you wanted to do? And was music going to be part of that plan?
Well, it's funny. If you told me 20 years ago that I'd be leading financial strategies for a bunch of different nonprofit organizations, I probably would have laughed because that was probably the last thing on my mind. I think when I graduated high school, I was debating between either becoming a doctor and going the pre-med track or becoming a music professor, which could not have been any more different. Those two tracks.
Well, I mean, there are some similarities. If you want to be creative about your description, there's math, problem solving, exploration, but that's being quite generous.
For sure. And I certainly wasn't planning on taking business courses or anything in college, but I did start taking some classes in economics. And I think that started to unearth something that I had been very interested in, even in middle school and high school. I'd always been very interested in the stock market. And I always loved investing, obviously not huge amounts of money. I would use my allowance money when I was in middle school. And then I worked in high school and I would use my work money to invest in some stocks. I got really into Jim Cramer from CNBC. I just liked his personality. I don't know why. And this was, I think, before he was doing Mad Money. He was on some other show, but it was basically the same thing. And I think that's what really got me into stocks at first. And I made a very smart move when I was in middle school. I got into the IPO of Google, and that really took off from the first day. I only put $2,500 into it, but you can see what that looks like today. A $2,500 investment in Google from day one.
So Google IPO'd on August 19th, 2004. Yeah. I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can plug it in those variables and you can see for yourself.
Yeah.
Play around with it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It basically never looked back, which is fascinating because stocks usually don't do that. But that's one of those rare ones that just kept going up and up and up and up.
I got to ask why you thought to even invest. I mean, you're pretty young at that time. What interested you? Why did you choose Google back then?
I had been using it, I think maybe before it became readily adopted. I do consider myself an early tech adopter in the first place. That's just always, I'm very interested in technology, and I'm usually one of the people who buys the first or second generation of something because I want to explore it. Very into artificial intelligence as well today, right now, as that's becoming extremely popular. But I also like to think that I was a little bit ahead of the curve there because I'm able to do stuff with AI that people don't realize I'm able to do with AI. And it's only because I've had a couple of years head start before Chat GPT became totally mainstream.
Give us one of your secrets. Tell us something that would surprise us that you've accomplished using AI.
Sure. So in preparing for this podcast, I told Chat the things I really wanted to talk about. And I said, can you put this into some bullet points for me so that as we go through these questions today, I'll be able to reference some of these as I'm talking extemporaneously. And it spit back exactly what I needed it to spit back.
What were the prompts? Did you feed it data? Did you feed it your resume?
I've been feeding it data for years, so it knows who I am really well. One of the biggest tell whenever I see something written is if it starts with, it's not just this, it's this. That is like I know somebody has used AI for whatever they've just written.
I think I'm at risk of being labeled as an AI bot myself because I often start sentences with, it's not just this, but also. I have to correct myself these days.
Yeah. I've trained my bot to never use that phrase. And I've also trained it to never use the M dash, which is another tell. And it's frustrating because I've spoken to a lot of writers who are like, I love the M dash. It's my favorite piece of punctuation. And I know exactly what you're talking about with AI. It is killing me because it's ruined the M dash because it's all over the place.
Yeah, very cool. That's a great jumpstart into skills. At some point, we can dive deeper into skills surrounding AI.
Absolutely. There's no way I could juggle all the clients that I have now if I didn't have AI helping me. And I freely admit that to every client that I work with.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I'd actually love to dig in deeper and hear how you're using AI to manage all of your clients and the workload.
Yeah. So one of the ways that it's helped me a lot is giving me first drafts of financial statement narratives. I think one of AI's greatest skills is combating writer's block. I think when you're at the level of a CFO, you're really not dealing with the numbers on a transaction by transaction, day to day bookkeeping sense. You're dealing with numbers in a way where you need to use them to be able to tell a story. So it's extremely rare where I would ever present numbers without context, without a story behind it. And sometimes I'll present that live and in person and I'll speak about it. But other times I might just submit a report. I have found that it's been difficult for me just to get started on what I want to focus on. And AI has been really good at giving me just that first little pass of maybe focus on this. And then I can start writing. That just helping me get over that writer's block, I think has been fantastic in combating procrastination. I don't ask it to rewrite what I've written. I know a lot of people will do that. They'll start with something and then, they'll ask AI to rewrite it all. And then when that happens is when you start to see some of those tells of AI. Because I'll just say,
Yeah.
all I want is proofreading for punctuation, grammar, nothing else.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk of using AI to replace your own writing as opposed to in concert with or supporting your own writing is that you lose the personal touch. It's not your voice, your tone. It's not who you are anymore.
I do use it for a lot of math and a lot of complex calculations. And I use it for when data has been given to me and it's like all over the place. And in the past, I would spend all the time writing the formulas in Excel or in a statistical analysis software to get everything where it needs to be so that I could actually run analysis on it. But AI is extremely helpful in short circuiting that and saving me tremendous time. What I actually like to do when the data sets are really complex, I will just do things one step at a time with it. And I'll go back and forth and I'll be like, okay, here's step one, find this particular source of data in these 20 spreadsheets that I'm uploading to you. And I want you to rename them this. And that's step one. And then let it learn that, let it know that. And okay, now step two, I need you to do this with it, create a pivot table that allows me to look at it this way. So it's that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
that's still way faster than me writing the formulas themselves, especially when you have disparate sets of data.
Well, it's also like showing your work back in math class in elementary school. You have to show your work so you understand each step to get through the process and understand the logic, not just the results.
It's very good at that. I do that with my children all the time. Yeah, whenever they have a really complex math problem for them.
We jumped really quickly into career and skills, which is awesome. But I'd like to know how your career began.
Yeah, so as I said, I had these original paths. I was either going to become a doctor or I was going to become a music professor. And I still stuck with the music professor track. That was despite the fact that I was getting more interested in economics and I was getting more and more interested in the market. And after college, I decided to go that music professor track and I was pursuing a PhD actually in historical musicology. And after I got my master's, I actually stopped pursuing the PhD because I didn't have a desire to be a college professor anymore. At the same time as I was getting my master's in historical musicology, I started working at the New York Youth Symphony, which is a small orchestra. I actually started off as just a marketing intern. But after my boss left, the executive director of the symphony said, hey, do you want to take your boss's job? And his job was director of finance and operations, and it really oversaw every part of the business side of the orchestra because it was a small staff. There were only like 5 full-time staff. And I, never wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth or just seize the opportunity, said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And he said, there's going to be a lot of accounting. Have you ever done any accounting before? And I said, no, but I'm really eager to learn. My grandfather's an accountant and I will make sure that I become the best accountant you have. I got hooked up with one of the trustees of that organization who was a big shot partner at one of the big 4 accounting firms, took me under her wing. I took a bunch of classes on accounting and I really fell in love with accounting. And I don't know what it was. I think about it as a musician. It probably had to do with like pattern recognition, is my guess. I've been a musician my whole life. I started playing violin when I was 3. I started playing piano when I was 7. I started singing in middle school. Now I probably can play like 7 or 8 instruments, and it's just always been a part of my life. And I think music really taught me how to see patterns. And accounting is a lot about seeing patterns. Oftentimes, when you think there may be an error in the financials, it's because a pattern isn't being followed. And if and maybe sometimes there's an anomaly there, and then, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's something we need to look at. And I think what also music may have taught me around that is, okay, when you see something like that, there's an anomaly, you have to learn how to improvise a solution around it.
I love watching musicians who are masters on YouTube. I'll watch like their live concerts where seemingly a mess up and how they recover from it, or hitting a wrong note. I saw John Mayer recently hit a wrong note and how he recovered using theory and just walking down the scales. I've seen Victor Wooten, who's an incredible bassist, talk about how you can't not hit a wrong note. There's an amazing moment if you go search Harry Connick Jr., I'll link it below, where he's playing live and the audience is clapping on the one note, and how he can quickly get them to clap on the second beat, the offbeat. It's brilliance, and it's improvisation, and it shows mastery.
That is the difference between being a good or a great musician and being a master musician, is the ability to improvise on the fly when something like that happens in a live situation. Those folks who can just keep poise and grace under pressure. It's what they call in music and in sports. They call it flow. You've probably heard this expression before, these sort of master athletes.
Yeah, flow theory. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, it's like something that I'm just really fascinated by, is that how there can be some folks who can just get into flow so flawlessly. I'm a huge sports fan, so I think that's really why I got into the notion of mastery in sports as much as I'm interested in the mastery of music. And I think about the playoff game in the NFL, where it's the Ravens versus the Bills. And the Bills were not playing well, and the Ravens should have won that game. And what you saw there was someone like Lamar Jackson, who usually does not have flow, had total flow throughout that game. He was spectacular. And all the critics about him in the past have been, oh, this guy can never do it when it's the clutch moment. He was spectacular. But the person who wasn't in flow was his tight end, Mark Andrews, who dropped the ball twice in 2 critical moments, and easy passes, stuff this guy would have been able to do at any point throughout the regular season. And it was such an amazing moment to watch that, where someone's saboteurs in their brain, those voices in their brain, were preventing Mark Andrews from being able to do something that is the easiest thing in the world, just to catch a ball that's 3 yards away.
So speaking about flow theory, in that early stage of learning business finance, were you able to get into a state of flow because you appreciated the subject being music, and therefore you could find yourself in that state of flow easier?
I think that was certainly a part of it. I imagine if I was working at a company that sold widgets, I probably wouldn't have been as passionate about it. I got connected with the CEO of the trade association for the opera industry, and it's called Opera America, and was interested in working for him because I love symphonic music, I love chamber music, but opera is actually and still is my big passion when it comes to classical music. There's something just about the collaborative nature of opera. It really is, to paraphrase Wagner's words, Kunstwerke, this just all-encompassing art form, because it has everything in it. So I really wanted to work for Opera America. But the only position that was available was an executive assistant role. But I don't think you want to be an executive assistant. He said, so keep in touch. And we kept in touch. Every couple of months, I would just give him a quick update, just so he always remembered my name. And lo and behold, about 2 years after I was working at the Youth Symphony, he sends me a note and says, hey, can we meet? And he told me in confidence that he was going to be letting his CFO go, and he wanted to know if I wanted to take on that role. And I was like 25 at the time, so it was pretty crazy. I think it was inspired by a couple of things. The fact that I had the initiative to continually reach out to him and to keep updating him on the things that I was doing at the Youth Symphony, which were exactly the same things he needed in his role for the CFO role, but it was going to be at a larger scale and a larger scope. Instead of being a local orchestra, this was going to be a national organization with a budget that's 6 times the size and with a big endowment and all this sort of stuff. And I think the other thing he liked about me is he went to Amherst, I went to Haverford. We had a kind of small liberal arts college connection there. And there is something about small liberal arts colleges. I truly believe that you become an adult faster, because it's really hard to hide at a small liberal arts college. Your classes are in these small seminar rooms. You might have 3 or 4 people in a class. You get really close with your professor. You can't hide in a 500-seat lecture hall. You can't miss a class. And you're going to have to speak and you're going to have to defend your writing or your music or whatever it is that you're presenting at any given moment. So I've always said that you become an adult faster. So at 25, I get this job after I had interviewed with a bunch of the trustees too. Folks there definitely saw me coming in. They were like, who is this young whippersnapper? I was number 2 in command there and everybody's older than me. So it was an awkward 6 months.
Was it nerve-wracking for you to come in at such a young stage in your career into a big role like that?
Yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking for me. And I was concerned that I might not make it, that this was too big for me. It was going to be overwhelming and I was moving too fast. But the part of me that I think has a lot of competitive drive, and I'm very lucky that there's a part of my brain that always tells me, no, Larry, you can do it. I know you can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. And part of that is learning about things I didn't know about. So I would spend a lot of time in the evenings and the weekends studying up on the parts of the job that were brand new to me. For example, I was only used to dealing with finance in one state, New York, and now I had to deal with it in 50 states. And every state's law is different. That's something that was really overwhelming to me because I was speaking to folks all across the country and they were referencing local laws and state laws that I just knew nothing about, laws that really impacted their financial statements.
Did you look for mentors to provide guidance?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, my oldest brother, Mark, who is a very successful screenwriter. He's written some very big blockbuster movies. And he's such an inspiration to me because after college, he just went to the West Coast. He started working in the mailroom at a small film company called Savoy Pictures, which doesn't even exist anymore. And he wanted to become a screenwriter, but he just needed a job. And one day when he was delivering mail to one of the folks who was working there, they were having a very in-depth conversation about film. And the guy was surprised. He said, you're working in the mailroom. How do you know so much about film? And they had this whole conversation that he went to Wesleyan, was a film major and all this sort of stuff. And then he started talking to him and said, I want to become a screenwriter. And this gentleman would eventually go on to become his agent, this guy that he met, because he took the chance on him. He said, send me one of your scripts. Let me see. And my brother Mark gave him one of his scripts, and the sort of rest was history. It was this magical thing. And my brother had no connections in the film world at all. And by just happenstance, these two people met. And I think Mark's inspired me in a number of ways. He really talked about seizing opportunities, like just seize the moment. When there's something there, when the opportunity knocks, don't shy away from it. And he also talked about you got to put in the work. If you don't know how to do something, you really have to put that time in to learn all about it. Loyalty is really important to me. It's a big core value. And when we were talking about at Opera America and having all this overwhelming stuff around, I actually did speak to my old boss a lot, my boss from the New York Youth Symphony, who I left. I never want to leave a job that burns bridges. It's really important to me that I keep those relationships up over time. And while obviously my first boss was quite upset that I was leaving because I was doing a lot of good work for him, he understood that, look, they're doubling your salary. They're giving you this huge opportunity. Of course, he gets it. But he said, keep in touch.
There's a way to remain loyal, but also still follow your own path.
Yeah. And I think he probably thought that, I'll never speak to him again. But I always kept him updated. And I used to invite him to concerts when I started working at Curtis later. And he would come down to Philadelphia and see the orchestra with me. And likewise with Opera America, after I left Opera America, I was there for about 7 years. And I got recruited to be the CFO and COO at a tech startup. But I was able to join the board of Opera America. That was a way of myself saying, okay, this organization got me to where I am right now. I never would be able to have this incredible opportunity now that I have it at the Pew Charitable Trusts. And I had Mark Skorka, the CEO. Having him as a mentor as I moved to the next part of my career has been essential. And I wanted to give back in any way I could. So being a volunteer member of his board and helping to provide financial management and continuity was something that was very important to me. And I think he really appreciated, and we keep in touch constantly.
What a way to show recognition and support for those who supported you early on.
Yeah. Just keeping those connections up is so critical. After I left that Pew Charitable Trust spinoff and I got recruited to become the CFO at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia.
I know that opera is a big part of what you love about music. It's your favorite. And it's so interesting to think that you don't even have to speak the language, if it's in Italian or any other language for that matter, to really feel the storyline and be connected to that music.
I once sang in Latvia with my barbershop quartet around midnight, and we were a U.S. arts envoy during the Obama administration, and we got sent to Latvia on behalf of the State Department to teach barbershop quartet music, a uniquely American art form, to Latvian singers. One night we were supposed to give a concert, like a 2-hour-long concert, to folks, none of whom spoke English. And they either spoke Latvian or Russian. And I was backstage kind of freaking out and saying, how are we going to be putting on a 2-hour concert? This audience is going to hate us. They're not going to understand a word we're saying, where every song we sing is in English. And my lead singer said to me, he said, Larry, you're going to have to do a lot more from a performance perspective than you ever have with this one, because you're going to have to sell this with your face, your body language. You're going to have to get the story across that way in what we're singing about. And after the first song, we sang Tonight from West Side Story. I remember it so well. It was an immediate standing ovation. And these folks probably had no idea what the song was even about, maybe from a lyrical standpoint, but they clearly got the gist of what we were singing about based on how we were performance.
This reminds me of a post that I saw you make on LinkedIn after you and I had already been introduced. You talked a little bit about your experience through barbershop quartet and choral music and what it taught you about leadership and teamwork. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Despite the fact that I think folks may pigeonhole finance folks as sort of bean counters and just want to be left to themselves and leave it antisocial, that really couldn't be further from the truth. There's certainly the most successful folks in finance are really able to work well with others because collaboration is so critical to the financial function. When collaborations gel, you get a really successful organization because finance and the rest of the organization is working so closely hand in hand. And I think there is something very similar to that to a chorus setting or even a barbershop quartet where it's just 4 people. You can't do one without the other. If there was just a finance department and you had no product, sort of what's the point of the finance department? Likewise, if you just had a product or a service that you were selling, but you had no idea if you could even survive beyond the end of the day as an entity, these really are complementary skills and relationships that are required for successful organizations to thrive. The organizations that don't thrive are the ones where finance and the rest of the organization don't really talk to each other, and finance is boxed away and just seen as, oh, those are just the bean counters. Don't worry, they're just gonna produce the financial reports. You don't need to worry about anything like that. Those organizations aren't going to do well because they're not optimizing the skill sets that the finance staff has that the rest of the organization may not have, or certainly at the same level when it comes to financial strategic thinking.
How does somebody level up? How do they learn to manage multiple teams across a larger organization in concert with one another?
Yeah, I would actually say join a musical ensemble. That's my own experience.
New HR program.
Yeah, I think joining a music ensemble is probably the best organizational training you'll ever get. You're dealing with a lot of personalities that tend to be all over the place because music attracts folks from all walks of life. So you're getting the diversity of working with other people. You're also understanding that when you're in an ensemble as opposed to being a soloist, nobody ever whistled a symphony. It's a great little nugget that someone once said to me when they were talking about collaboration. And it's completely true because a symphony is only a symphony when all of the instruments are part of it. And while some aren't playing at any given point in time, there's very rarely an instance where there's just one part playing by itself. And if you don't know how to read music and you can't be in an orchestra or you can't be in a band, I would certainly suggest joining a chorus because most people don't know how to read music. They're learning by rote. It's one of the most amazing art forms because I see it as the soccer of music. Soccer is probably the lowest barrier to entry sport out there. You simply need a ball. It's why it's such a popular sport around the world. A lot of the countries around the world that are developing don't have the sort of economic prowess of countries like the United States. But soccer is universal. Anybody can pick up a ball and start playing soccer. And that's why even in some of the poorest countries in the world, you have incredible soccer players coming out of them. Choral music, I like to describe it the soccer of music. It's the most democratic in terms of the sort of barriers to entry. Anybody can join a chorus. And as long as you can carry a tune, just like as long as you can kick a ball, there will be a part for you to be able to fit in. And so that's what I would absolutely suggest. And if you're not really into singing, then I would join dancing. Again, you just get to meet people, and the more opportunity, if you're in finance and you maybe see yourself as an introvert, and that's certainly the way I saw myself originally, the more opportunities you can get out to meet more and more people, the more likely you will be to succeed. Because as you grow in your finance career, the skill you have in Excel or the skill you have and knowledge you have about accounting becomes like table stakes. Everybody has that when you start going up the ranks, and what separates those who really make it into the executive suite from a finance track is the ability to connect with people and the ability to be able to tell stories with all that knowledge that you have from accounting and from Excel.
So what possessed you to leave this more traditional role in finance to go be a fractional CFO?
Yeah, I had felt that I had really done everything I had originally set out to accomplish when I got to Curtis. Frankly, after 8 years, I felt like I had accomplished what I was asked to do, and I was getting a little bored. I'm someone who has a restless personality, and I really wanted to try something new. And I didn't know what that next step was going to be. I thought maybe I'll just go to another organization like I've done my entire career and just be the CFO of one organization. But then I got an opportunity to get a little part-time fractional CFO gig, and I really liked it. I felt that as a fractional CFO, as someone who wasn't on the inside every day, I didn't feel like an owner in the sense that when I was a C-suite executive at the other organizations I worked for, I felt a different type of responsibility. It was more personal because I felt like an owner of the company. And I realized the only ownership of a company I wanted to have was my own. And I was very fortunate that I started doing a lot of good work there at Children First, and I got two other small little fractional clients. And then I got an opportunity to serve as the interim CFO at Albright College, where I am right now. And this opportunity really spoke to my love for change and moving fast, because this was a school that was in real financial dire straits. And I was part of a small team that was brought in on an interim basis to turn the school around. And we did it so fast that it was astonishing to the trustees, to the employees, to the community of Reading, Pennsylvania. And it's just a really special story. And when we eventually write the case study of how we turned this place around, I think it's going to make for a great read and hopefully an inspiration to a lot of other small private colleges that are maybe facing similar financial situations. I believe the fractional CFO space, which has always been very big in the tech startup world for many years, is still quite new to the nonprofit sector. And I think that for smaller nonprofits, especially those with less than $5 or $10 million in revenue, they could really benefit from the fractional CFO model instead of trying to go out to market and getting a good but not great CFO for the amount of money that they can compensate. And I really want to get in on the ground floor of this. So I've been speaking to a lot of friends and colleagues of mine who are also in the middle parts of their careers or even later parts of their careers. If I had a cadre of other great nonprofit CFOs that I know and trust, I could see myself building up a little business around that area and getting it on the ground floor. So that's what's next for me. But I hope to keep all the clients that I have right now because I love every single one of them. And they're all so different. They're in totally different fields. Some are for-profit, some are nonprofit, but they're in all different fields. And none of them are in music, which I think is the most interesting thing, despite the fact that all my previous jobs were in music or the arts or some sort of tangentially related to music or the arts, whether it was an education organization or a tech organization, it still had some link to the arts.
Who knows where you'd be right now if you would have even gotten into finance without getting that jump start by way of music.
For sure. Yeah, the arts are really stereotypically associated with right brain creativity, and finance is often seen as the left brain logic analysis part. But I think that great musicians are also analytical. They have the best timing, they have structure and precision. I think the greatest finance leaders are really creative. They think about strategy, they're problem solvers, they're entrepreneurial, they have vision. So I try to be one of those people who really dispels that myth.
It was clear to me from the beginning when you started talking about sports as an analogy, and clearly you're using left and right brain strengths. And to me, it's a beautiful blend. It's a wonderful blend for who you are, your personality, and some of your interests and skills.
As I've started to move out of the music field from a finance perspective, I listen to music more now, and I am practicing my instruments more now than I ever have before. And I don't know why that's the case, but now that I'm out of the music industry from a finance perspective and I'm doing finance for a bunch of different industries, somehow it's all come full circle. And I am more into music than I ever have been in my entire life.
Yeah, maybe you're just course correcting. It's no longer part of your day-to-day, everything you're talking about and working towards. So therefore, you're finding more ways to make it meaningfully part of your life. I really loved hearing your story, your journey, and how you've applied your skills and some of your hobbies and interests and how they have blended so beautifully and meaningfully in your career. So, Larry, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
I want to thank Ephraim Epstein for recommending Larry as today's guest And to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.